So I'm here with Jennifer Madrid, and she is Madrid, and
Yeah.
she is going to. She taught me how to say it phonetically. Uh, we are going to talk about her and her experiences with reading recovery. And folks, she is an authentic teacher. She is a teacher that doesn't need to be teaching anymore. Her main income is retirement now, but she is still out there doing it all. But I've talked with her on Twitter many a time. We seem to
Yes.
be kindred spirits. And so I'm going to be quiet here for a minute, and uh, I'm going to change the view over to just the speaker. And Jennifer, it's all you. Jennifer, would you tell us a little bit about your teaching background and experience? We'll start with that.
Sure. I taught for Los Angeles Unified School District for 17 years. I worked in a low income Title I school. I had a principal, Dr. Baldrama. He sent me to my reading recovery training. He had the faith in me to go do reading recovery training. And I did my training at Los Angeles County of Education. And it was one of the best things that ever happened. I have seen reading recovery work for so many kids. Anyways, cut over 2 years later after I leave LA Unified, the traffic got a little bad, so I decided to work closer to my house in New Hall School District, and reading recovery by that point, and especially out here, it wasn't being done authentically, and unless you have had the training or you have had somebody really sit down with you for quite a while and explain it, you really need the training and do authentic lessons the way that they were meant to be done. And now I'm retired, and I see students in my house who fit the reading recovery child profile after I assess them, and then I see them 3 times a week, 45 minutes at a session, and the extra 15 minutes is to do a read aloud.
I love that. Yes.
And they just get to be read to, and then we start the lesson, and they know it's lesson time, and it's time to go.
Okay, and this is a great segue into my next question, which is, you're going to be telling us about the kinds of things you do and why you think reading recovery is viable and why you think it works. And I can't tell you how many, I'm also a reading recovery trained teacher, and I can't tell you how many times I've used what I've learned there. Now, I can't call it reading recovery when I'm just using some of the strategies, but on the other hand, I mark my own personal professional life as pre-reading recovery and post-reading recovery. And I know you're going to tell us a little bit about some of the in-service work you've done in the rest, and some of the best trained reading people around are former reading recovery teachers. So I'll let you get into what's happened in what's happening now with you, and why you think recovery is such a viable option. Once again, I'll be quiet.
Okay. So after so many years of teaching reading recovery, and I'm a reading recovery purist, and after seeing so many kids discontinue and using reading recovery the way that it is meant to be used, and seeing the children thrive, and following the student where they need to go depending on their needs. It doesn't matter. I don't have a lesson plan. Reading recovery teachers might have a few things that they have written down that they're going to hit. But basically, if I have a student that is starting to get, let's say, the T sound when we're using sound boxes, that I will try to incorporate more into the lesson, because like I said, I follow the student, and we use leveled books, and they progress, and we keep going, and we ramp it up in their ZPD, their zone of professional development, using a running record. And they know their strategies. We work on strategies. That's number one, starting to get those strategies in their head. And after doing it for so many years, you, as a teacher, former teacher, it works, period.
Okay, I'm going to be a skeptic on you for a minute and say, you know what?
Sure.
I've heard out there that those reading recovery teachers don't begin to even teach any phonics, and they don't know the first thing about phonics. Well, that's what I've heard. Well, I don't believe it at all. So could you use a soundbox demo for us and show us how that might, well, how might you teach a lesson around a soundbox?
Sure. And in reading recovery, of course, we are doing hearing sounds and words. So if I'm using my whiteboard, and I'll turn my phone around. So,
Sounds
okay.
good.
Okay. So tell me if this looks okay.
We're starting, if you can use the function where you do a selfie, that flip the screen, then you can see what you're.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I'm not good at technology. I don't want to mess everything up.
I think it's just a little button there on the iPhone. We'll find out.
Okay. I'm too scared to push it.
Okay. Well, then I'll give you.
I'm gonna kneel down.
Okay.
And I can see it.
I'm seeing the whiteboard, so go ahead with it.
Okay.
There we go.
Okay, so what I do is, for sound boxes, and this can be done on paper or on the board, I just take, let's say I have a student who we're starting at the very beginning, and we want to do at. And I don't necessarily say the word at, I just say at. What do you hear? Not the letter, what do you hear? And so the student would take, and they must use the hand that they write with. I learned that a long time ago, because it helps when they actually start writing on their own. It just makes a big difference when they're using one hand and the hand that they write with. Like I said, I'm very purist. So I would have, okay, what sound do you hear in this box, after I had taken my finger and gone like this, at. What sound do you hear over here? What sound do you hear over here? And then I have them, sometimes they'll do this when we're first starting. And so I will say, watch my finger at, and then see if they can problem solve and figure out where the sounds go. And I'm not necessarily asking for letters at this point. When we get more involved, the sound box would be 3. And it could be anything from listening to the sh sound and having them put the SH in one box. And then let's say we have the O, the ah, and the T. And I'm asking them, before they put the letters in there, which sound do you hear here? What do you hear here? What do you hear here? We go out of order. And then they put them in the correct boxes. Then you can do this box at the end. And tell me we don't teach phonics when we do something like this. By this point, they know their letters. This is a later, maybe in week 6 or 7. Then we do, let's say we're doing the word bake. Or let's say we're doing the word, well, I don't have a T here. So, I mean a K. So let's say we're doing the word, let's say we're doing the word goat. This would be together, the O and the A. And then we would talk about, well, actually goat is not the best. Let's do gate. There we go. Okay. So they would have their letters up there and we would talk about what this g act. Okay. Well, here's the magic E and it's a special color. I colored it over red. So they start learning without me explaining, okay, when we put this E at the end, the magic E, it changes this vowel into saying its name. I think it's most kids, not even just reading recovery kids, and even adults that would have a hard time when you say, oh, you put a silent E at the end of the word, it changes the vowel sound after the first consonant. So then we get to this, and by the time they can do this by themselves, and at the same time, we're working on, and this is my favorite thing to do. This is my favorite thing to watch, is when you have them work on, let's say you start with at, and here's my A and my T. Then you can change it to it. I love this one. I just love this. Then I will say, okay, and they always put their finger under and say the word. Then I'll say something like, okay, listen to the word, it, it. And I kind of make it a distinction between the H and the it at first, and then I say hit. And then we start doing things like this. And then we start moving the medial vowels around. I just adore this part. I think it is such a strong phonetic component, and it really gets to the root of, can these students who are doing reading recovery manipulate letters and sounds after they've had the proper strategies and way to look at words and how to read, which I call like a backdoor approach, a different approach. And I just love doing this, putting an O, putting the A back, and then they have to search, which I'm doing right now. Okay. And then taking the end sound, boom. I love that. And then a lot of times I will use these underneath. And I will say, okay, in that word, put a counter under the sound When they first come to me, they're so used to trying to get the letter. They're so focused on the text. I want them, and of course, reading recovery, that's one of the main components. Hearing the sounds first is so critical and so important. And so I use sound boxes on my new whiteboard, and it has a chalkboard on the back. And then I also use sound boxes on paper. You can, all it takes is, and I'm going to turn around here. All it takes is a piece of construction paper, a marker, make some sound boxes. It's not
Okay.
complicated.
I'm just going to interject a couple of things here.
Sure.
Any skeptic out there that says recovery teachers don't know about sounds and don't teach about sound, I think you just blew that out of the water. There's no way we can say that you don't know a lot about sound. I was also listening a couple of times, and I'll do it myself. You put the schwa sound at the end, like tuh, but most of the time, without even thinking about it, you were not putting the schwa sound at the end. You were doing it clear and crisp. And I know you could go on for a long time on this, but I think the point is made here that, and this is going to be a very easy, quick question for you. Do you think your kids come away knowing how words work and how sounds work in words?
Oh, yes, most definitely.
Yeah, and I concur. Oh, yes, most definitely. Okay, now tell us next about the comprehension things and the kind of things you might do to make sure kids are reading to remember and know what they read. Is that part and parcel of what you do? And how do you do that? How do you check whether or not they know their stories?
Okay, of course. Reading recovery is okay. Well, and I also wanted to say something before I forgot.
Oh, absolutely. Go for it.
When I am working on the board with a student and it seems like they're getting a certain sound or whatever, I will kind of guide them a little bit into putting that into their writing notebook for the cut up sentence. And I will make the strategic cut where the student needs to break up that word by sounds and I have them play the teacher and they put their hand out and they have to tell me what I need to get them. So if cat is broken up into k, at, they say at and they say k. They don't say the letter C. They say, and by that time, I know when they know all their letters, I assess them. But I think that is so, I love that, especially when you're saying going, you make that cut between the go and the ing. What's better than that? You could do worksheets all day long and it's organic. It comes straight from them. So as far as comprehension goes, I have so many books. It's kind of ridiculous. I saved all of my reading recovery books, thank goodness. And when we get to comprehension, I orally ask them questions at the end. I make them retell it. Maybe they can sequence the most important 3 parts. We start talking about protagonist, antagonist. We talk about patterns. They enjoy it so much because they have success that they're able to tell me exactly what the book was about. I could sit there, I could make something, write it up, and have them answer questions that way. But I do it orally, make sure it's in a complete sentence, and they know that. And they tell me what the book is about. And then when they discontinue, and I do keep my eye on them, I give them grade level text and I ask them about it. And it's usually a nonfiction passage. I'm not too fond of the fluency reading while it's timed, but fluency is another thing we hit. There are so many things that we hit in read and recovery in a half an hour. It's just amazing.
I think I'm going to cut you right there. And
I could talk forever.
Oh, I know. And I'm going to take that last sentence. It's amazing. And I have to say, yes, it is amazing. And I want to point out to the listeners out there that what I'm hearing you say is these kids, every lesson are doing some kind of comprehension thing. Every lesson, they're doing some kind of word work. Every lesson, they are creating their own sentences. And they are learning to, once they
Yes.
know how these words work, they're
Yes.
building them into the sentences they are creating. So
Yes.
kudos to you and everything you're doing.
Thank you.
So, and it works. And I would like for you to speak to that point. And some anecdotes about kids that you, because you now have been doing this long enough to have some kids that have
Yeah.
been doing it for where you let go of them a couple of years ago and
Yeah.
they're still doing. So I'd like to hear some anecdotal evidence about that. And then I think
Okay.
it's time to wrap it up. But I want to hear about those kids that I've got people saying, oh, reading recovery doesn't stick. Well, what do you think? Does reading recovery help stick? What's your experience with the kids you're working with?
Most definitely, yes. And if you have a student that maybe is faltering a little bit on meaning, structure, visual, or they're not in their ZPD, you know, you hear this from a parent, or when I was teaching in public school teacher, then that's what you do. That's when you pull that child back and you untangle whatever's going on. And I also wanted to say one thing before I tell you an anecdotal story is that most of the time when I get a student, the first few lessons, they are so used to being looking at the text, period. They simply stop. They stop what they're trying to do. They just stop reading. And so with reading recovery, they get those anchors, those anchor words in print that help them and give them confidence and the strategies to go through those early lessons and then get to those later lessons when they're reading like a champ. Okay, so really quickly, I had a boy at Langdon. His name was Danny, and he went through reading recovery program with me. This was many years ago. So I was in my classroom one day after school, and I thought, oh boy, I'm going to get mugged or something for sure, because I had left my door unlocked and a man came in, and it was Danny.
Oh my gosh.
And he said, Mrs. Madrid, I remember you telling me when I went through reading recovery that if I needed help or if I needed a letter for my college applications, that you would help me. That story right there is, it makes me cry almost every time I tell it. But that story right there, when I took Danny and he knew maybe 4 letters, maybe 2 sounds, and now he's actually graduated from college. He's a police officer now. I think that kind of says it all.
I really do think it says it all. So wow. So powerful stuff. No question in your mind that reading recovery works. No question in your mind that reading recovery does teach phonics and comprehension.
Everything.
And no question in your mind that you still want to do it, even though you're retired, and you're still doing it.
Yeah.
Even when you don't have to. So that, I think, says it all. So I think that that's a perfect place to wrap it up. What do you think?
Sure, I could go on forever, but sure.
Okay. Well, you know, the teachers at heart, we could be, we could do another hour easy and trade stories and the rest. But this stuff works.
It does.
And that's the final message here.
It's
So
the nuts.
okay, and I have a long-standing tradition with this blog, and that is the Zoom wave goodbye. So right now we are going to raise our hands and give us a Zoom wave goodbye. And
Good
thank everyone very much for listening.
It was nice talking to everybody.
Okay,
Very
here
nice.
we go.
Okay.